Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, it is so satisfying, guys. We've got power-tripping army sergeants, psycho Karens, police officers, nightmare bosses, all getting taught lessons they won't forget. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So this happened just a few years ago, when I used to spend a lot of my free time exploring natural parks. Nothing shady, just me, nature, and some peace and quiet. Anyway, one evening, I'm driving home after a long day of hiking. I'm tired, a little dusty, and just thinking about a hot shower and dinner. And then, I see flashing blue and red lights in my rearview mirror, and I'm thinking, oh no. So I of course pull over and this police officer walks up. He says, evening, license, registration, where are you coming from, yada yada yada. Typical questions. I hand over my license, smile politely, and then say, just coming back from the nature park, officer. The officer nods, and then looks at my car like he's expecting a kilo of something to fall out of the glove box. He then goes, have you been drinking tonight? I saw you swerving a bit back there. I tell him, no, of course not. I am a bit tired and must not have noticed I swerved a bit. But now, he's just looking at me like I outsmarted him or something. He then says, where did you say you were coming from again? I repeat, the natural park, a little slower this time. He then squints and says, which one? I tell him, and he says, and what were you doing there? At this point, I'm trying not to laugh. I tell him, walking, it's a park. But the officer keeps going. It's the same question over and over, just slightly reworded, like he's waiting for me to slip up and tell him I was doing something bad or something. At this point, I realize he's not looking for answers. The guy's just enjoying the power trip. So I decide, fine. You want to know where I've been? You'd better buckle up, buddy. I then smile and launch into the most detailed, cheerful monologue of my life. I say to him, oh, it's such a lovely park. I parked by the visitor center, 2 rows down from the map board. You know, the one with the faded paint? And then I took the Riverbend Trail, not the long loop, the shorter one. And then I saw the cutest family of ducks right by the second bridge. Oh, and the weather was absolutely perfect. It was a bit cloudy but warm. I even stopped for gas before I got there. I paid $52.10. I remember because I thought, wow, gas is expensive today. I then grab a bottle of water, parked under a shady tree, stretched a bit to limber up before hitting the trail. By now, the guy's face is turning redder than his cruiser lights. I kept on going though. I tell him what birds I saw, how far I walked, what time I turned around, how many bugs were on my car when I got back, full documentary mode. Finally, after about 2 minutes of this non-stop enthusiasm, he cuts me off. He says, ma'am, that's enough. All right, you can go. Be safe. I just smile sweetly and say, thank you, officer. You have a lovely evening. I then drive away, a little smug and feeling like I just weaponized small talk. Hey, the officer did seem to want to know all the details of OP's whereabouts, and she gladly gave it to him. But with that said, this person comments, guys, and they say, former police officer here. Number 1, never answer questions not related to your identification or the validity of your insurance and registration. Number 2, never engage in small talk with law enforcement. Number 3, never consent to a search of your vehicle or property. And lastly, always insist that officers provide their probable cause for the stop, the test, and the search. And this person shares their comment on how they got back at a police officer. They say, way back when I was 21, one of my 3 jobs was working from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. at a 24-hour gas station / convenience store. One of the biggest trainings that they drilled into all of the workers was to card anyone who looked younger than 40 while they were making a purchase that contained alcohol. As we were the only place open after 10 p.m., we would get cops in our area to stop in for either a coffee or alcohol, depending on which shift they were on or off. One night, an officer comes into the store in uniform to buy a 6-pack of beer. From my observations previously, he was off duty. I ask him for his ID. The officer then gives me a what the F look, and he looked down at his uniform, and he said, "Really? Are you really asking me that question?" My response was, "Sir, I don't know who you are, and you look younger than 40. I'm required to card anyone who looks younger than 40. The guy was pretty pissed about it, repeating that he's an officer, and clearly, take his word for it, he's over 21. But he let me check his ID anyways. Once he left, I start giggling, and the thing is, I have heard his name before from friends who've had some run-ins with him before. I knew his reputation as being a jerk, and he really showed it that night. So this happened a little over a decade ago. At the time, I was a young sailor, an ET3. I was just finishing up my training pipeline. I was supposed to transfer to my next command, but somehow, my orders were lost, so there I was stuck in limbo. And for those that don't know, ET3 is a Navy combination of our job and rank. In this case, ET stands for Electronic Technician, and the number designates our rank, 3 being Petty Officer 3rd Class and 1 being Petty Officer 1st Class. Usually, that kind of downtime is pretty chill. You check in occasionally so they know you're still alive and you haven't partied yourself to death. But I wasn't so lucky. My least favorite person in the world, an ET1, decided to make it his personal mission to make my life miserable. Now, we'd already had a mutual understanding. We hated each other. And now that I wasn't technically under his supervision anymore, he couldn't officially boss me around. But that didn't stop him from trying. His first clever move was to assign me to sweep the sunlight off the walkway in the middle of winter in the Northeast. So naturally, I worked for about 4 hours and then went home. He was furious that his plan backfired. The next day, he tells me that my new job is to clean our workshop until it meets his impossible standards of clean. So I do the basics. I dust, sweep, mop, clean the windows. He checks and he says, "Not clean enough." I just thought, okay, fine. I strip and wax the floor, polish every bit of metal I can find, and it's still not clean enough. At that point, I thought, challenge accepted. I reorganize every tool locker, fix the squeaky door, polish the stairs, everything. And he still says, not clean enough. Finally, he says, and I quote, "Do you not understand me, petty officer? This room is not clean enough. I want you to make the floor sparkle." Well, the funny thing is, our mechanics had this jar of two-tone glitter paint powder. It was pink and purple. I didn't ask why they had it, I just made sure to borrow it. I head down to their shop and I ask if I can take it off their hands. Naturally, they're suspicious. They ask, "Why do you want that?" To which I tell them, "Would you like to see an ET1 completely lose his mind?" Hearing me say that, they hand it over instantly. So I spend the next 3 hours stripping, waxing, and buffing the floor again, this time with the glitter mixed in. I even polish the workbench for good measure. I then call the ET1 back and let the mechanics know to stand by. The guy walks in, looks around, and he starts to say, "Not clean enough," until he sees the floor. He loses it and he says, "Did you just wax glitter into my floor?" I keep a straight face and I say, "You told me to make it sparkle, so now the floor sparkles." At this point, everyone's gathered around trying not to laugh. ET1 turns bright red and then purple, veins bulging like he's about to explode. And I swear, I'd only seen someone get that mad in movies. The guy starts yelling, loud, incoherent, pure rage, and then storms out to the smoke pit, scattering everyone in his path. This is the point where our Command Master Chief shows up, wondering what all the commotion's about. He takes one look at the floor and he bursts out laughing, and he says, "You know what, son? Just take it easy until your orders show up. We don't need an attempted murder at my command." So for the next 3 days, I just relaxed. My orders finally came through, and I was off to the fleet, leaving behind one very sparkly floor and one extremely angry ET1. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, OP waxing pink and purple glitter into the floor has gotta be the best thing ever, right? Like, what a perfectly executed malicious compliance. Like, hey, you wanted the floor to sparkle, now it does. And this user comments and shares their experience. They say, ex-army here, stationed in Germany. I got in trouble one night. I was a smartass 18-year-old, and I was told to buff our barracks floor late one night. The same floor that was made out of non-buffable brick/tile. So I ran the buffer over a test spot and it didn't do anything. Right when I was done with my test, our CQ for the night came by and they asked how it was going. I told him the floor wasn't buffing and that it was a waste of time. He yelled at me to do it anyways, and he went back to the other building where the post was. So I said, F it. I put away the buffer and the other supplies and went to my room for a few hours and took a nap. I woke up, called him over to inspect it. Well, the guy came over, looked at it, and then told me I did a good job and I was done for the night. I just went back to bed. Effing military life, eh? This happened years ago, when I was just starting to wake up to companies abusing employees, and employees taking it because they're thankful to have a job. I worked as a sales rep for a company in the technology field, two-way radios and alarms to be specific. This said company never had enough technical staff, so I started training myself, and I asked our lead technician to teach me to program and sort out minor problems as well as do installations. This was nice, since I was doing client visits 1 to 4 times a month, depending on how big the client was, and then I could sort out problems while I was on site. I ended up doing most of my clients' installations, and the manager of the technical department was happy because it was less work for him, and he knows I do the jobs properly because I want to keep my clients happy. Accordingly, he had no problem signing my timesheets and overtime hours as well. Overtime was around 10 to 20 hours a month, so 2 to 5 hours a week, which I think was a great deal considering I was doing the jobs of 2 people actually. Now, this went well for a few months until one day, just before payday, I get called in by the owner. The guy had my timesheets for the past few months in front of him. He asked me what they were, and I gave him an explanation. He then scratches my overtime out, saying that sales reps don't get paid overtime. I of course tried to explain to him why I was claiming overtime, and that he can ask the tech manager, but he was having none of it. He said I wasn't going to get paid overtime. Now I was pissed, as it was a little extra money, but whatever. About a week later, I was at a client 100 miles away from the office. We had a big installation and was almost done, except for the programming and tidying up some cables. I checked the time and I told the apprentice technician to pack it up. He was like, but we're not done with the job. That's when I told him, I don't care. I don't get paid overtime and it's 2 p.m. and it's still a 2-hour drive back to the office. So we pack it up and the client comes out and I gave him an explanation saying that we'll be back the following morning to finish what was effectively 30 to 45 minutes of work. The client of course wasn't happy, but he understands that I don't get paid to work late. I was on the road about 15 minutes when my phone rings. It was the owner, the same one that said I don't get paid overtime. He asked me what I was doing and why I wasn't finishing the job, and the client was not happy. I told him the explanation above. And then I told him that he said I don't get paid overtime, so I'm not working late and I'll drive back to finish tomorrow. There was silence for about 5 seconds as I assume he realized I was following his instructions and there was nothing he could do. He then told me to go back and finish the job and we can talk about it later. I told him no, unless he pays me overtime. He says he will, and I tell him put it in an email before I turn back. I could hear him go red in the face and he says I'll send it now. A few minutes later, the email came through. We turned around and finished the job. I got paid my overtime and never again was there a problem with my timesheets or hours booked. I was the only rep out of 5 to get paid overtime. Seriously, don't you just love it when dumb bosses are like, don't work any extra hours, I'm not paying you. And then they get mad when people don't work extra hours? I'm just glad to know that OP told the owner to email it before I turn around and go back. Never forget to get things in writing, guys, especially when dealing with shady bosses like that. But yeah, with reading all of these stories, the stuff that some people do never ceases to amaze me, guys. Like, I would be mad as heck if my overtime that I already worked was scratched out. I'd be looking for a new job. Guys, let me know what you would do if you were in OP's shoes. So allow me to start by painting a picture. This was 3 years ago. I was working in the bakery of a local high-end grocer. Think gourmet Whole Foods. I'd been there about 3 years at this point. What had started as a college job for a semester turned out to be a longer-term thing. I loved the work, the customers, and my coworkers. That is, until the final month there. I was in line for a promotion to assistant manager. In my time there, I'd been passed over for different promotions for people that were more, quote, favorable for the company image. When the position came up, I was the only person across the company that applied. I thought I was a shoo-in and had been led to believe that it was as good as mine. The old assistant manager was transferring to a higher position, and he took extra time to train me before leaving. That said, weeks pass and I hear no news. No one in my department was getting an answer for when I'd been given the step up. That was until someone elsewhere asked us when the new assistant manager was transferring in from another store. It turned out that my boss's boss, who we'll call Greg, had decided that I was a terrible fit, and the guy went above my boss to push someone else into the role, someone who didn't want the job and hadn't been trained for it. I, of course, complained to someone higher up, saying that I should have at least been told the decision was reversed. No word came, and the new assistant manager started. It only took a couple of days to realize that she had barely worked in the bakery, and she hadn't been trained for her position. She also seemed to target me, assuming that I didn't know how to do the most basic things we did. I later found out that Greg told her that I was a problem employee, and I needed to be watched closely and given guidance. Out of the blue, our manager was given the boot and replaced. She had no warning, we had no warning, and suddenly, someone from a completely different store and department was in her position. This person had no clue how to do the job, and with the training that the old assistant manager gave me, I took over most of the day-to-day tasks. Greg comes in one day and he threw a fit that I was doing inventory. He yelled at me and he said I had no place acting like I was in charge and doing jobs that weren't meant for people like me. He honestly made me feel like crap and then marched off. I thought to myself, fine, inventory not getting done. Dating and tossing old product, not my problem. Helping customers with issues and complaints, let me grab the manager instead. And making sure that things are filled and ordered when needed, no thanks. I started doing the bare minimum and took all of my breaks. I clocked in exactly when my shift was scheduled and left exactly when it ended, no matter what I was doing. If they didn't want me to go outside my station, then I wouldn't. It was easy days for me. Suddenly, issues popped up left and right, and our new management was scrambling to figure things out. I told them nothing, since it wasn't my place to teach them how to do their jobs. This all came to an end when I was called into a meeting with the store manager, who we'll call Rob. Rob says, "Hey, so Greg's told me that you've had a lot of issues lately." I respond, I bet he has. I'm just doing my job now because he told me to. Rob then says, well, he told your manager to stop scheduling you after today. He wanted me to tell you. That's when I ask, are you firing me? Rob says, no, Greg says you won't be scheduled, but you may be used as an emergency call-in during the holidays. That's when I ask Rob, so I'm not working, but I'm not fired? This is BS. Rob says, I agree, but he's above me when it comes to what happens in your department. I just tell him, alright, I'll finish today, but after that, I'm done. This is some stupid work politics, and I'm not playing this game with him. I kept my word, and I finished my shift without complaint. As soon as the end hit, I just walked away and clocked out. That's when I told my coworker what happened during the meeting. I then bid them farewell and walked out. The next morning, I was woken up before sunrise by a call from Greg. He said that almost everyone in our department had quit overnight and he needed me to come open. That's when I reminded him that he didn't want me there, so I quit. He then demanded that I return to work and help train a new team, so I did what anyone would do. I told him to do it by himself, to go F himself, and to go have a lovely effing day, and then hung up. He called back again, begging me to come back, that he'll put me on the schedule again, and I told him again to F himself. I heard from a few friends who were still there that our department never recovered all the way, and people still talk about how we all quit together one day. If you see this and you recognize the story, F you, Greg. Yeah, I think we can all agree with OP when they say that. And seriously, that is some kick-ass worker solidarity from OP's coworkers. Like, it is such a pity to know that because of dumb politics and a dumb boss, they wasted such a good team. Like, it always pains me when I read about a place that's been running like a well-oiled machine for years get totally destroyed by one power-tripping idiot. So yeah, once again, F you, Greg. This happened a while ago, but the outcome was very sweet. Where I live, we have a very busy national train network, which is very well known for its delays and failing trains. To compensate, the company that owns the trains will hire buses if there is a longer outage to facilitate people using their public transport services. As you can imagine, when there are unexpectedly no trains on a busy moment of the day and they have to call buses to transport all the passengers, this is a mess. There's long queues and a lot of people trying to skip the line to make it home earlier. So there I was, almost in front of the queue, certainly making the next bus after being in line for almost 40 minutes. The queue was still a couple of hundred people long, and there was some anger amongst people. People were pushing and skipping the line left and right, and as I'd been patiently waiting, I was also getting angry at others. At this point, every person trying to get to the front of the line is immediately yelled at by several people, and in some cases, they're pushed out of line if they don't listen. The next bus finally makes its way to the front of the line. The pushing from the back intensifies and the door opens, and to my and everyone else's horror, the bus driver gets out, and he says, "My shift is done. My colleague should be here soon," and immediately closes the door behind them. As there was now a bus waiting, the amount of people skipping the line doubles. It seems all the hundreds of people have their eye set on this particular bus. But people in the front of the line are not going to give up their spot. This young couple moves towards the front of the queue. They hear the words, "Go back," and they comply. A mother of 3 children moves to the front, and she hears, "You have to wait," just as all the others, and she complies. That's when a solo gentleman is walking directly to the front of the line. The guy also gets yelled at by the others near the front. It seems like he wants to make a defense, but then silently complies as he somehow finds a spot in the queue about 50 places back. After that, there were some people cutting the line, and all were resolved in the same manner. As the bus was still closed after 10 minutes, the queue got longer and longer, and there were already 2 buses waiting behind. But they couldn't drive off or take any passengers as the empty bus was blocking the road. The anger was shifting from people yelling at each other to now yelling at the transport company, and of course, the bus driver that wasn't showing up. This resulted in the guy standing next to me yelling fairly loudly, "Where the hell is this idiot of a bus driver?" That's when the gentleman that wanted to cut to the front of the line yells back, and he says, "I'm here. I tried to get to the door, but you all were screaming at me to go to the back of the line, so I complied." So yeah, when the guy was cutting to the front of the line, he was actually trying to open the bus and drive us to our destination. But as he was greeted with dozens of hateful, "Go to the back before you get your butt beat," he complied to our anger, and he did just as we asked. Every single person entering the bus, me included, apologized for being so jumpy and rude. And I know for sure that I will not be so quick again with yelling at people cutting the line before I'm sure what their intentions are. Guys, that bus driver handled it perfectly. And seriously, I can't help but to laugh just thinking of the bus driver in a sea of people popping up saying, "Surprise, I'm the bus driver, the guy you've been waiting for the past while." But yeah, a lot of people are arguing that the bus driver's the bad guy in this whole thing and to not praise the man for the compliance he pulled up. But to that I say, if I were in his position and a sea of people were screaming at me to get to the back of the line and they wouldn't let me get a word in, I might do the same. So this happened over 20 years ago, back when I was finishing up grad school and working part-time at my dad's auto salvage yard in New Jersey. It was August, so it was hot, humid, and just gross outside. Between the heat and the grease, I was always covered in grime from head to toe. Washing up every time I got dirty would have turned my skin into sandpaper, so I only bothered before eating. Now, here's another thing. I looked nothing like my dad. My dad is this small, wiry guy who's maybe 5'8", 140 pounds. I, on the other hand, am 6'2", around 220 pounds and powerlifting at the time. So yeah, people usually don't connect the dots that we're related. Anyways, one afternoon, this customer comes in to pick up something he'd bought earlier. Some big, used, dirty car part that we pulled straight off a vehicle. I don't remember what it was, just that it was heavy. Now, this guy stands out immediately. He's wearing a button-down shirt, khakis, shiny dress shoes. Basically, he looks like he's lost. Everyone who comes in here looks like me, sweaty, greasy, and over it. The guy hands me his receipt, and I tell him I'll bring it out the side door. I then grab the part, toss it in a wheelbarrow, and wheel it outside. The only car in the parking lot is a nice Acura sedan. Not exactly the kind of vehicle we usually see here. The trunk's open, and the guy's pacing around on his phone, so I just set the part down on a piece of cardboard by his car to keep things clean, and then head back inside. A couple of minutes later, the guy storms in and says, "Hey, what the hell am I supposed to do with this?" I respond, "Install it, I imagine." The guy's not amused, and he says, "Why is it dirty?" I tell him it's used. He then says, "Well, how am I supposed to get it home?" I respond, "In your car." He then snaps and says, "Well, why didn't you put it in the trunk?" That's when I point to the sign behind him that says we're not responsible for loading parts into customers' vehicles. Liability and all that. The sign's half hidden by the door, but it's there. The guy turns around, red in the face, and he yells, "Well, what am I supposed to do now, genius?" And I'm thinking, apparently, because I'm covered in grease, I must be an idiot. At this point, 2 regular customers are standing nearby. I tell them I'll be right with them, and I go outside to deal with Mr. Genius myself. Because honestly, I just want him gone at this point. So I grab a blanket, toss it over his bumper, and then carefully lift the part into his trunk. To do that, I had to rest one hand on the edge of his car. And yup, I left a big, greasy handprint. Totally accidental. While I'm loading, the guy's hovering right next to me. He's supervising. My arm brushes against his sleeve, leaving a nice smear of grease there too. The guy's still ranting into his phone, calling me genius again. And that's when I finally say, "You came to a salvage yard to pick up a heavy, dirty, used part in dress clothes with a luxury car. Who's the genius here?" That's when he notices the grease on his car and his shirt, and he loses it. He then snaps and says, "I want to talk to the owner." I respond, "Sure thing, he's out in the yard." We then walk around the building, and I point him toward my dad, who's out there on the forklift moving junk cars to the crusher. It's time-sensitive work. The tow truck blocks the street when it comes, so he's focused. The guy starts walking toward the forklift, and that's when I stop him, and I say, "You can't go in there, it's dangerous." The guy ignores me until he sees our Doberman trotting behind the forklift. She's totally friendly, but he doesn't know that. The guy freezes, and that's when I tell him, "You'll have to wait until he finishes. He'll be a while." The guy huffs, and he says, "Fine, I'll tell him exactly how his customers are being treated." And the guy waits and waits for 40 minutes. Every time I walk past, he mutters something like, "You're gonna be sorry," or "Enjoy your last day working here." Finally, my dad shuts down the forklift and stands up. The guy perks right up, pounding on the counter. He screams, "He's done. Go get him. I want to speak to him immediately." So I walk outside with him and wave my arms, and I yell, "Hey Dad, come over here. This guy wants to talk to you. He wants you to fire me." And let me tell you, the look on that guy's face was priceless. He just stares at me, realizes what I said, and he mutters, "F you." He then storms off, jumps in his car, and peels out of the lot. I never saw him again. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitledpeople episode, where psycho Karens think they rule the world. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.